Opinion polls continue to show the New South Wales Labor government on course for defeat at this month's state election. Some polls are suggesting the swing towards the coalition could be the biggest since 1950.
Now, Premier Kristina Keneally is in the middle of a 4-day tour of the state's marginal seats and joins us now from Sydney. Premier Keneally, good morning and thanks for joining us.
Good morning.
When the State Secretary of the ALP in New South Wales, Sam Dastyari, said a few days ago, Barry O'Farrell is going to win this thing and he's going to win it big. Did you know he was going to say that?
Well, let me just say, Virginia, Sam's right. If the election had been held on that day, there would have been an O'Farrell government. But the election isn't being held today, or indeed any day this week. It's being held in 3 weeks. And if there are some blokes who do want to curl up in a ball in the Australian Labor Party, they're welcome to go ahead and do that. But I'm fighting this election every single day up until the minute the polls close. It matters for the future of our state. It matters particularly that we hold Mr. O'Farrell to account. To date, he's been light on detail, and when those details do slip out, like we saw his shadow treasurer give a very detailed interview about a state-based mining tax, just a few hours later, he had to issue a response saying it wasn't his policy, it wasn't his plan. These are the sorts of details, the sorts of glimpses that do creep out, and when they do, I'm going to hold Mr. O'Farrell to account.
I want to get onto your feeling about, well, OK, that's a comment that was made a few weeks ago or a few days ago, and it could have been right then, but it might not be right now. We'll get to that in a moment, but can I pick you up on an interesting observation there and a very arresting image that you use about some blokes in their ALP curled up in a ball in head office. Do you feel like that you're a lone woman fighting this on your own without the support of those ALP blokes in the front office?
Well, I'm not particularly worried what the blokes over in Sussex Street want to do. I'm out there with my candidates. We're on a 4-day tour. In fact, we've just extended it.
Sure,
now
but I want to return you to that question, Kristina Keneally, because you might be a tough and formidable woman, but you can't do it on your own. You actually do need a good team. You do need a strong party behind you, and it seems that you don't have that, do you?
Well, Virginia, where I was just about to say is the reason we've extended the tour for 2 days is that because I'm out there with candidates who are campaigning their heart and soul and their guts out. Candidates like Paul McClay getting up in the seat of Heathcote every morning at 5 a.m. to go out on a railway station. Candidates like Therese Cook, who's in the most marginal seat in the state, and she's out there every single day fighting for the families in Miranda. Right across this state, I've got candidates working so hard for that core Labor value, a strong economy and a fair go, standing behind families when times are tough. Our cost of living approach, our Fairness for Families Act, is all about giving families a break. And I've got candidates right across the state, a team of ministers around me like Carmel Tebbit and John Hitzistergos, who are working hard day in and day out to put forward that vision. That's why we've extended this bus tour.
Did you know Sam Dastyari was going to say it?
He told me. I told him he was a fool, and if he wants to curl up in a corner, he can go ahead and do that. But this woman's tougher than that. The candidates around me are tougher than that, and we're not going to wait a moment until we're not going to waste a moment until this election is closed on the 26th of March, putting forward our practical, our positive vision for families, and holding Mr. O'Farrell, who wants to be the ultimate small target, holding him to account. All
right. Well, look, returning to that observation that you made about, well, OK, that's a call that perhaps Dastyari could have made on that day, but it's not one that you could make now or in 3 weeks' time. Are you seeing any evidence at all in all this hard campaigning that you're describing and this focus that you're describing by your candidates? Are you seeing any evidence that the polls are turning around for you?
Well, look, what I see is people talk to me day in and day out, and can I say I've seen some reporting that would suggest we've only been in Labor seats. Not true. Been in the independent-held seat of Lake Macquarie, where I undertook a impromptu street walk. First few people I spoke to said, I like what you're doing, like the Fairness for Families package, and we're sticking with you because of that. Now, that's why we're extending this bus tour. People are responding favourably to the Fairness for Families package, and we're going to continue to talk to people about it. It's a $250 cap on electricity, a $250 rebate on electricity prices, a cap on public transport fares. It's a good deal for families in this state who are struggling during tough economic times.
So are you saying you can win this?
You know, I'm not going to walk around the way Mr. O'Farrell does, arrogantly, assuming he's got it in the bag. I think the man's held about 2 press conferences in the last week. Let me say this, I'm going to fight every day. The poll will be decided on the 26th of March. What I want to be clear about is that I'm not going to let Mr. O'Farrell waltz into office and have a great big blank check. I'm not going to let him walk in without a mandate or at least a clear sense of what it is he's going to do to our state. People of New South Wales deserve to know what an O'Farrell government would mean for them and their families. At the moment, they simply can't answer that question.
Kristina Keneally, is that your way of saying that voters then need to look very carefully at the choice of casting some sort of protective vote, if you like, making sure that O'Farrell doesn't get a massive majority, both houses, and that then allows him to ride roughshod? Is that what you're suggesting, that voters need to actually look at putting some sort of brake on the majority that he might get?
Well, I think people need to be very mindful of the last time that we had a coalition government that controlled both houses. We got work choices. People need to be alarmed by news this morning that Pauline Hanson is entering the race. The prospect of a Conservative-controlled upper house, whether it's a straight-out majority or indeed a coalition of Conservative parties controlling the upper house, could be extremely detrimental to our environment, to workers' rights, to families, to people with a disability or community services, families who rely upon those services. I mean, one of the most heartless things I've seen from a political party is Mr. O'Farrell, who has said that they will cap the number of children that the Department of Community Services assists each year. Now that quite simply is a ridiculous and heartless policy. That's the sort of scrutiny I'm putting on Mr. O'Farrell, but it's also the sort of thing people need to be mindful of if we're contemplating parties like that represented by Pauline Hanson getting some sort of leverage in the upper house.
Yes, I did want to ask you about Pauline Hanson, and you've mentioned that yourself, but just one more thing on there. What was your first response when you heard that she was going to stand as a candidate in the upper house?
Well, first of all, we as the New South Wales Labor Party were the first party to make clear that we would never provide preferences to One Nation or indeed to Ms. Hanson, and that remains the case today. And can I say that Mr. O'Farrell, who has a former One Nation candidate and party official standing in the state seat of the entrance, well, he needs to come out today and make clear that a coalition would not support Ms. Hanson in any way, would not give her campaign any comfort.
All right, look, a couple of more questions I want to quickly get through just while time is still with us. How damaged do you believe that your campaign or your attempt at regaining government has been by the introduction and the announcement of a federal government carbon tax?
Well, you know, I don't think the Commonwealth government should waste a day in addressing what is one of the biggest issues facing our nation, certainly our economy, and also our environment. And, you know, let's not forget that since John Howard's time, people have been talking about dealing with the challenge of climate change, putting a price on carbon. It's something that's been supported by Malcolm Turnbull. It's something that clearly we as a nation need to get in there, roll up our sleeves, face these challenges honestly and squarely, and do something about it. Calling climate change crap, as Tony Abbott does, putting your head in the sand, as Mr. O'Farrell is doing, is simply not an answer. Now, I welcome the fact that the Commonwealth have made clear that families will be looked after, particularly those who are doing it tough. And certainly, I say anyone who is speculating on what a carbon price might mean is doing just that, speculating. What we now need to do as a nation is the detailed work of putting together our response to a challenge of a carbon-constrained future.
Well, that's, I have to say, a very loyal response from someone who's been described by many close to the government as having been cut adrift by the timing of this policy. Can I interpret from that perhaps down the track you would be interested in joining the federal push, the federal government, and perhaps taking a federal seat?
Virginia, I tire of this question, and I tell you no.
I don't tire of asking it.
Well,
would you stay in opposition?
You wouldn't be doing your job. You wouldn't be doing your job if you didn't ask it.
Will you, if you lose, will you stay in opposition? Will you try and remain as leader of the opposition?
Well, Virginia, I get asked that question too, and I'd like to point out I'm running for two things. One, to be the Premier, and two, to be the member for Heffron. And I would never seek to preempt the decision of the voters in Heffron. But if I'm elected, again, as the member for Heffron, and I ask the people of Heffron again for their support, I will serve them for the next term of government. As for the future, well, I'm the leader of the Labor Party, and I'm in that position no matter what happens on the 26th of March.
All right, and if you stay as the leader of the Labor Party, do you somehow sit down and have a tough conversation with Sam Dastyari?
I think there's plenty of people in the Labor Party who understand my ability to have some very direct conversations with them. As I've said, I'm fighting this election every day because it matters to those core Labor principles: a strong economy and a fair go, standing behind people when times are tough, looking after the most vulnerable, and protecting jobs. That's what we've delivered over the last 12 months. The second lowest unemployment rate in the nation, 138,000 jobs added here in New South Wales, and at the same time increasing funding for disability services, increasing funding for community services, and in fact growing our hospital, education and transport systems.
Kristina Keneally, good to talk to you. Thanks so much.